to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. And the Asian Art Museum is delighted to serve as the venue for this evening's discussion. Of course, it's a museum does not have all the power to solve the problem that we're going to address, but museum certainly can serve as a platform for discussion. And certainly we're very much part of the ecosystem that artists based. And we're here to actually to showcase the works of artists from diverse cultures through hundreds of thousands of years. And here also we're here to support our artists from our own community as well as from Asia. So this is very appropriate, and we truly feel privileged to serve as the venue. And for the same spirit that Asian Art Museum has been launching and sustaining a program called the Artists Drawing Club. It is not about artists doing drawing or artists teaching audience to do drawing. Actually, artists are here to draw connections. The connection between their practices with the collections in the Asian Art Museum. The connections between the art that we showcase with the issues that as a humanity we all commonly confront, commonly share. So this program has been truly rewarding because artists' perspective, their insights have really shaped the experience of our visitors and how serve with our visitors with perspective of our artists. Same time, that our collection also serves as inspiration for some of our artists to make new creations, to draw very tangible connections between their practice and the ancient traditions or the contemporary Asian traditions. So in the same spirit, I think today's panel will be truly very informative and insightful. So I'm looking for, just as all of you, to hear the insights that our panelists will share with us through their individual speeches as well discussions. And after the panel discussion, I hope you will have time to stay look at a show that we're going to open tomorrow, Couture Korea. This show is again about connections, the traditional Korean dress and the contemporary cutting-edge expression in Korean cultures, and how you have the international connection through a Korean perspective, if you will, because part of the Korean tradition also inspired the Western fashion trends as well. So on and so forth, we are all here for making connections to address very grave issues that we all commonly confront and trying to solve together. Thank you very much.
Hi there, my name is Toby Becerra and I am a philanthropy advisor for Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I want to start by thanking the Asian Art Museum for hosting this really lovely event in this really beautiful space. And the Silicon Valley Community Foundation is dedicated to changing the lives of our community members in any way we can, and we address that in a myriad of ways. I run our Donor Circle for the Arts. A donor circle is a group of collective grant makers, donors that put their resources together and make grants out into the community for a dedicated cause. I run the arts, and my colleague Leah Wilberding here is the director of our Donor Circle for Safety Net, which is focused on housing. So we kind of never imagined that our two donor circles would have a symbiotic focus, but tonight's conversation is where we really have come to a crossroads together. As we all know that there is this tremendous crisis in our region, regarding housing, displacement, and we felt it was a really important conversation to have tonight to talk about the impact of that on arts and culture in our region. So I want to jump right in so that we can get to everyone and have our panelists all have a great amount of time. We've got a really great group of panelists that are all working to solve this issue of how are artists going to live here? How are artists going to work here? How, without them here, can the creative economy impact the Bay Area positively as it has been for so long? And not only the economy, but the culture and the heart of the region. So with us at the end, we have Moy Eng, and she is the Executive Director for the Community Arts Stabilization Trust, otherwise we commonly refer to as CAST. We have Brion Nuda Rosch, who is the Studio Program Director at the Minnesota Street Project here in San Francisco. We've got Connie Martinez, who is the CEO of SV Creates, which is Silicon Valley Creates. We've got Dr. Robert Mintz, who is actually the Deputy Director, Arts and Programs here at the museum, and Joanne Lee, who is Director of Consulting Services and Program Development for the Northern California Community Loan Fund. So what I want to do is just let them each give you a couple-minute overview of who they are, what they do, and how they're addressing this issue. So I'll start down at the end with Moy.
I knew I was going to be the warm-up. Okay. I'm Moy Eng, the Executive Director of Community Arts Stabilization Trust. I know it's a mouthful. Otherwise known as CAST. And CAST is a new social enterprise. It's a nonprofit social enterprise focused on creating permanent, long-term solutions for space, workspace for the arts in San Francisco, Oakland, and other urban settings. How do we do that? We're structured as a nonprofit real estate development and holding company. And to date, we were just an idea in 2013. And in the past 4 years, we have acquired and constructed, renovated, and opened 2 centers in central San Francisco, stabilized 2 contemporary arts organizations in them, Counterpulse and the Luggage Store Gallery, in the Tenderloin and in Central Market. Through their programs, they will be able to service 95,000 people a year. That's 1 out of every San Franciscan. In addition, we've attracted extraordinary support, public and private sector, to the tune of $27.4 million, and most of it philanthropic. Not bad for a startup. And last but not least, we've been already cited as an example, and we can talk about more what is the CAST model and what are the solutions that we're testing in real time, and why people in other cities from London to Tel Aviv to New York, Austin, Miami, Seattle, Denver, and LA are interested in CAST, as well as cited as a model in the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, the World Cities Culture Forum, as well as in LISC. So that's it in a nutshell. Happy to open up for questions. More later.
Does this come out?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to follow that. Let's get it. I'm the most underdressed person in the room, so I am the artist speaking tonight. So first and foremost, that's important to me because I'm speaking on behalf of artists. I'm also in an administrative role as a director of the artist studios at Minnesota Street Project. And to give a really quick background on that, that was founded by 2 individuals to claim 100,000 square feet of space in the dog patch. Andy Rappaport and Deborah Rappaport identified the problem of galleries being forced from their leases, being evicted, artists being displaced as a real estate problem. They wanted to provide a real estate solution. In that, they provided their own capital. And I'm going on my notes because I have a lot to say, and I'm not as well spoken to a group as Moy here. So they're providing capital to claim space. And what I think is probably a very common denominator of everyone speaking tonight is claiming space for the arts. There's a real misconception that artists are looking for a handout. I will say, representing artists tonight, they are not. We had over 300 applicants to 30 studio spaces, all willing to pay. And that's an important stat because we are not providing all the space needed in the city, and there needs to be more work done. This work is happening by the panelists tonight and many others in the community, and we need to keep that work moving forward. So one thing I also want to address is, what is claiming space? What does that mean? What happens within this infrastructure? And within this infrastructure, creativity, innovation, ideas, collaboration, all these wonderful things, this sense of wonder, this experience. Art making is an experience. And by claiming space, you're providing that opportunity for artists to continue working. You're providing that opportunity for galleries to continue to show this work. And those values and artists in a community, as Toby has mentioned, are essential in our society. If you look around this museum and you look at the thousands of years represented, who tells the story? The artist. And with that, we claim a lot of responsibility. And in a city that is thriving in so many industries, and the arts are struggling at the level that they are, and we're not looking for a handout, it's really important that our voice is heard, that there is collaboration across the lines, and we can move forward with solutions that create something that is a benefit to all of us. Did I go over everything here? And with that, yeah, I think, I want to open up to more conversation, and there's a lot more to talk about. There's numbers to talk about, and there's the process of which we've been able to achieve what our goals were 2 years ago to now operating at sustainability, which is a big goal of ours, is to become sustainable. So I'm really happy to be here and talk with everyone tonight about that. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thanks.
So my name is Connie Martinez, and as Toby said, I run SV Creates, and we are designed to elevate and accelerate our creative culture in Silicon Valley. And so we do that 3 ways. The work that we do falls into one of 3 buckets. The first is to build the capacity of our ecosystem. The second is to raise the visibility and value of the ecosystem, the arts ecosystem. And lastly, to increase access. So we have programs across those 3 buckets. The one that's most relevant to tonight's conversation is around capacity building. So we have a portfolio of about 80 arts organizations, a lot of them multicultural. In fact, in Silicon Valley, they're all multicultural because there's, in terms of a dominant culture, it's so broadly diverse. And so we help to fund them, we help to coach them, and we care about their financial resilience, and we care about this issue of space. So the big project that we have under that umbrella is we are building a 55,000 square foot creative center in Japantown. And that is to house 2 to 3 dozen smaller arts organizations, and then to provide and birth what we're calling a shared service center that provides below market services for the entire ecosystem. So that's part of our solution, not only to space, but also to lower the overhead and really spur collaborations across the ecosystem in Silicon Valley. In the area of visibility, and we're going to talk more about that as the panel goes on. Under visibility, we publish a magazine called Content, and Content is a platform, a storytelling platform about our creative culture, very artfully done, and we have both a print and digital part of that. And of course, social media. And then lastly is the increasing access, and so we focus on those children at risk, as well as our aging population. So we have programs that we essentially fund and or fuel. And in the case of children, we've created what is called Arts Ed Connect, which is a marketplace for teachers to go online, web-enabled, and buy arts education from our arts ecosystem with small mini grants. So that's just an example of one of our programs that's focused on increasing access. I'll stop there.
Oh, we're going to carry this. Hi. My name is Rob Mintz. I'm the Deputy Director for Art and Program here at the Asian Art Museum. And I guess, you may not initially have any questions whatsoever about what we do, because we are a big civic arts organization. We are a traditional fine arts museum. And as such, we fill a particular role in society that for many people is not directly connected to the creation of art in our community. But part of what I want to express to you is that essentially, we see ourselves as a kind of conduit. We are a space within which we give a platform for artists to speak, whether those artists are living or passed away many, many centuries ago and in distant places. But it's always through the voices of those artists and then the listening ears and seeing eyes of our visitors, our local community members, our tourists who come from afar, that's where we succeed. That's where we suddenly create a pathway of information sharing, of understanding, and of communication. Our concern that relates to the topic on the table is really one of being concerned that if the artists are not part of our community, then the platform that we provide, the vital service that we provide in terms of giving them a voice, becomes ineffective. That we're only giving voice to artists on the outside, artists at a distance. So we have a vested interest. Our success is essentially measured in part by the vitality, the livelihood, and the success of artists in our community. That applies to our school children who come in and hear the voices of artists. It applies to people who come here just for an hour during their conference when they're at some big hotel downtown. They too are moved by, or have the potential to be moved by, that experience of encountering a San Francisco voice, perhaps a Tenderloin voice, a local voice. And as Jay said in his introduction, we are exercising to the best of our ability a series of programs that happen primarily on Thursday nights in the summer, but during the days as well, when artists are brought in and given that platform. They're given a special space in which to speak or from which to broadcast their ideas. And really it's our goal to keep that going and keep that alive. And any help we can find to keep those artists in our community is certainly in our best interest.
Good evening. I'm Joanne Lee. I'm the Director of Consulting Services at the Northern California Community Loan Fund. So our goal is to help nonprofits build economic and financial sustainability. We are a loan fund, and so we do provide capital to nonprofits for affordable housing, community facilities, working capital. And on the consulting side, which is where I work, we provide technical assistance to help organizations with financial management and their real estate projects. And we work we work a lot in the arts and culture sector. And what we see is, as my panelists have said, the arts are amazing, right? Performance theater and dance and visual arts and youth art programs. It's really phenomenal. But real estate is not one of their programs. And that's where we come in. And when an organization is being displaced, as we're seeing a lot in the Bay Area in this real estate market, or even when they want to expand or they feel that they need another opportunity, we can help them with their space planning, with their financial planning, their organizational capacity building, and guide them through the real estate market, into new leases and sometimes into purchasing new buildings or buildings as a permanent home for them. In San Francisco, about 3 years ago, the city launched a program specifically for nonprofits at risk of displacement, and the Arts Commission funded over $2 million to help the community arts organizations who were at risk. And so we administered that program. And over the 3 years, we were able to help over 20 organizations with technical assistance, as well as providing probably another 20, 25 organizations with collectively $2 million to help them with their relocation expenses. And so, the numbers tell one story. In that, we were able to really preserve 200 jobs in the city and over 100,000 square feet of space, for arts and culture in San Francisco. And that was just over 3 years. But that program has sunsetted and there's new programs coming up. But that's just an example of some of the work we've been up to.
Great. Thank you all. So I want us to keep in mind as we're listening to the experts here is that I think it's pretty evident that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to this issue. So keep that in mind. Excuse me. Also, with artists, I think, whether they be performing or visual or otherwise, it's important to keep in mind that we're having this conversation in regards to their housing, where they actually afford to live, but where they work as well. Because very often, there's not a Google that they can go to, that has a facility every day. They have to find that space. So let's keep that in mind. Moy, I want to start with you. Again, I know, to kind of help us level set a little bit. So in your work at CAST and creating affordable workspaces for artists, we know that demand has outpaced availability. So it would be great if you could provide us some data, and as the crisis intensifies, do you see that there's an acute awareness on behalf of the donors that you work with that the crisis is indeed intensifying, or that there is a crisis at all?
I knew you would ask a four-part question. Okay, so you'll remind me of the 4 bullets and what I miss. Okay, so why don't we do this first and foremost? So let's look at the issue way up. We all love to live and work in San Francisco and the Bay Area. It is one of the most beautiful places to be. I mean, that's, is that it? Yes? No? Are you kidding? I'm leaving? Okay, so in this room is a microcosm of that feeling, and we all live here for that reason, and because of the dynamism. And one of the things that we come here for is for arts and culture. And I am one of the soloists in the choir. What I did not reveal earlier is when I'm not running CAST and working on the macro issue, I'm a poet, a singer, a composer, and a songwriter. That's a drink story, but later. So I'm coming at this not just as that, but coming at where we all have come at, is that we've all had experiences. Now, living here is expensive, so it's either expensive or prohibitively expensive. This is just not like a one-time crisis. This is a wave of which we're seeing a huge surge. So let's just sort of set that in motion. So, and yes, we're in a crisis at this moment, if we can call it that way. It's for artists and arts organizations, small and mid-sized organizations, community-based organizations that work in your neighborhood, in your community, that are delivering services, that are fragile, that are living with all sorts of leases. So if you'll forgive me, because I cannot keep all the facts in my head, I'm going to share with you some facts. So in San Francisco, the national real estate firm CBRE recently reported that, ready? The average rent for San Francisco spaces increased every quarter since 2010, and is now 122% higher than 5 years ago. Several years of tech-dominated demand have essentially overwhelmed supply pipelines and have resulted in one of the tightest real estate markets in the country. And in fact, it's 1 out of 3. And in fact, according to a Forbes poll, it's 1 out of 15 most expensive cities to live and work in the world. Dubious honor. A regional study, Status of the Bay Area Nonprofit Space and Facilities, reported in March 2017 that its respondents identified that ownership of their space and working in spaces specifically dedicated to nonprofits was going to be critical to their weathering the challenges of the Bay Area real estate market. 82% were concerned about the negative effects on long-term sustainability. I know Joanne will speak to that later. 68% of nonprofits serving communities of color and low-income communities were going to have to make a decision about moving in the next 5 years. And roughly half of them think that they're going to have to move and deal with an increase, a decrease in their organizational revenues. So we're not only looking at the issue of affordability, we're looking at destabilization, we're looking at lack of services. You can feel the ripple, but that's some. Okay, last but not least, Oakland. Let's move back into a city. According to 900 respondees in the November 2015 Oakland Artist Housing and Workspace Task Force survey, it reinforced for all of us that they said housing and workspace costs presented the biggest challenge to being an artist in Oakland. Nearly 50%, ready? Nearly 50% of the respondents, and there were 900 respondents out in the Oakland survey, said that they were on month-to-month leases. I didn't even include the percentage of those who didn't even have a lease but had a handshake, sorta, with their landlord, who didn't want to give them an official lease. So, pretty vulnerable. Last but not least, the task force then released a white paper in the spring of 2016, which highlighted the threat of displacement is particularly acute and high in workspaces where there is no commercial rent control and other protections. And just so you know, this is as of spring of 2016. There are newer figures, but a little more, I think we should presume. The average rent for office space in Oakland increased from approximately $22 per square foot to $37 per square foot. And if you're in downtown, it's $47 per square foot in the course of a year. So let me do the numbers. Let's just run it really quickly. Okay, let's pretend we're in downtown. You have 1,000. We're going to make the arithmetic easy. I don't do algorithms. 40. Well, let's roll it up to 50, just for the sake of rolling it up to 50, times 1,000 square feet. That's a nice living room space like this. So then you can have performances, exhibitions, community room. That's not unreasonable, right? So that's $5,000 a month times 12. That's $60,000. How many of you know small and mid-sized arts organizations and artists that are going to afford $60,000 in space, in rent? So noted. That's it for that.
Thank you. So I do want to jump to Joanne because it's a good segue for the question.
I'm actually Joanne's Vanna White. You didn't know that?
No. You're very good at that. Thank you.
No, we work, let me just say we work really close together. And in fact, what I didn't have, because I was trying to be really succinct, is CAST had the pleasure of being incubated at NCCLF. So they're our mother.
So Mama Joanne then. Okay. When looking at the issue of stabilizing nonprofits and specifically arts organizations, tell us how you accomplish this stabilization and capacity building. I mean, I know to boil it down in a succinct answer is challenging, but securing reliable, affordable space, what that does for a nonprofit, and then ultimately, the long-term impact on the community.
So this is what I tell our nonprofit clients. Say, this real estate market is moving really fast. And if you are not prepared, then it's going to move by you. So if you haven't done your space planning, if you don't really know what you can afford, if you don't really know where you want to be, and you've got a couple different ideas of different locations here in the city, and you want to go out and look at real estate with me or my team. I have a whole team of consultants. And we go out and we'll look at a place, and we've had this happen. We look at a place and the executive director says, oh, I kind of like this, but now I have to bring my board president, and I have to bring my program manager, and then I have to go through my finance committee, and then my board meets in 2 months. And I say, that deal is gone. We gotta be ready. And so we spend a lot of time helping organizations get ready, understand their space needs, where they want to be, build consensus in the organization, in the leadership, so that we have the priorities. It's almost a screening tool when we go out and look at space. Does the space hit your priorities? Can you afford it? We do a lot of the business modeling. What will happen when you move into a new space, not just the operating budget, but what kind of new opportunities does it open up for you in this? And can we earn new income, hopefully, out of that, or how will your programs change? What kind of partnerships will you be able to build there? And so we spend a lot of time on that first planning, organizational planning phase before we go out and look at real estate. It's kind of hard because everyone wants to go look out at real estate. It's very seductive, and we try to really work through a planning process internally first. And so, a quick story. We were working with an organization called the Women's Audio Mission. They're here in San Francisco, where they train young women in sound engineering and STEM, because really only 2% of sound engineers in our music industry are women. So they were in Potrero Hill. They said, we're outgrowing the space. And so we did all of that planning with them about what their new space would look like, how much could they afford. The executive director put together a board committee for real estate, started quietly raising money in that quiet phase. And, you know, we were quiet for maybe a year. And then one day, our staff, because we're always combing through real estate listings, found a recording studio south of Market. We said, "Are you kidding?" And we called the executive director and said, "We got to go look at this." We went down, we looked at it, we made the deal. She closed in 60 days. Done. And what that has done for her in stabilizing her budget and being able to predict what her operating and occupancy costs will be in the future, as well as being able to serve more students and other recording artists that use their facility, and raise their visibility, they've now opened in Oakland. So with that stability, they were also able to expand their programs across the Bay. So I think, you know, long-term homes, whether they're able to rent, and we've had organizations, you know, sign 10-year leases, you know, that's great in this market, and for some organizations, that's probably about how committed they are to one location and one set of space parameters. You know, but having that long-term ability gives them, you know, a home, a place to build their market, their audience, promote their visibility, and also really invest into the space, right? Artists have some real special space needs, whether it's sprung floors or dressing rooms or different studios and needing sinks in all the artist studios, all of that, being able to really invest in that and be able to build their programs. So we've seen, you know, these opportunities, while it may feel like a crisis, but then it can really become an opportunity to build some stability for an organization from there.
Thank you. So a really unique solution is Minnesota Street Project. So Brion, I want to ask you, something I find particularly unique about it is that it is a for-profit. It's not a nonprofit. And so tell us a little bit about why that approach was chosen to be a for-profit, and then how, you know, the outcomes you've experienced thus far and where you guys want to go.
We are a for-profit by definition, and I think it's important to understand what that means, because this is philanthropy, and Andy and Deborah and I like to say for-profit philanthropy. Our intent is not to make a profit. The intent is stability. And when Andy and Deborah started to take this idea around, they went to every person they knew and they asked, "Are we crazy to do this?" And all of their friends and peers and people they respected said, "You must do this." And the only way to achieve what we accomplished was under a for-profit structure. If we had to assemble a board, as Joanne has mentioned, if we had to talk with more than the founders, myself, and other directors and our small team, we would still be sitting in a boardroom today. We are able to accomplish in a triage type mode to this crisis, those numbers that you've listed, in a way that, as the person here today speaking from an artist point of view, I actually have an optimistic view of where things can go, even with what you've communicated. It's daunting, and I'm glad you provided those stats because they're important to understand. And we're navigating these solutions free of constraint because of our structure. We also, it's important to note, Julie Casemore, the overall director and leading the gallery program, is a gallery owner. Myself, as a director of the artist studios, is an artist. And when you're thinking about building this infrastructure and the Pandora's box of the things that happens when you go from an idea to support galleries, and then you buy a building to support artists, and then you have to have offices, and you have some extra space, so you're gonna have offices for nonprofits, and then you have to fund all of this. So let's start an art services company. You start with a few directors and 2 founders, and you go to a large staff. And then you also open up other problems to solve. And because we're a for-profit and we don't have a board to respond to, we're able to respond to those minute by minute And because we have a gallery owner running the gallery program, she knows the subtle nuances of all of our tenants who are renting space. As an artist, I can speak on behalf of the artist in a way, understanding the subtle nuances and needs. I was able to sit down with the architects to design a building, and I think it's probably the first building in the Bay Area to be built, purpose-built from the beginning as an artist studio, rather than an artist or a group of artists finding space and adapting to what's already there because it's cheap or you got the handshake. We built a building from the ground up with every intent to provide resources, tools, and services and an infrastructure to support art making. What are our goals? Our goals are just to become sustainable, but another important goal is to be a model. And what's optimistic for me is sitting in a room tonight with people invested in this conversation and the possible resources to take and adapt not only our model, but the variations of the models that are here today, because whatever philanthropy is sought, there's not one single model to find a solution to all the problems that are here and the crisis that we can speak of. So to throw out some numbers, we had 300 applicants for 30 spaces. We've served 10% of an applicant pool during a 2-month span of saying, hello, San Francisco, we have some studios. 10%. So just by my rough estimate alone, with the space that we've secured, 500,000, okay, let's just say 1 million square feet of space is needed to be secured now. The market moves fast, as you discussed. There are buildings in the dog patch. They're all PDR use. That's the zoning requisite for you have to produce goods or sell goods. That's why there's not a Twitter in the dog patch. That's why Adobe doesn't have a second campus there. They actually work with us in our things. I want to get back to collaboration with these people. But that's why that's not taking place. And we need to claim that space for that excitement and wonder I spoke of earlier. And it's obtainable. I think with the capital and the thriving industries in this town, it's obtainable. And let's talk about art and tech, okay? Because I'm going to talk about the elephant that might be in the room. I found 2 ways that people talk about art and tech in San Francisco. The first is art versus tech, or tech versus art. That's the conflict. That's why we're here. That's the struggle. That money is pushing out the opportunities for others. That goes really deep, and that's not the optimistic side of things. But what I found since becoming part of this project is that we're aligning ourselves with and partnering with many in tech and finding really amazing, productive relationships. And that's when I look at the optimistic side of things, and that's technology as a tool and art. Going back to what's here in the museum, going back to as early as Da Vinci, using technologies at the time that were brand new. Artists do that every day. And I've mentioned innovation because I hear everyone in the tech world say we're innovators. Innovation in tech. And that also can be related to the art making process. And I'm optimistic that there can be a relationship between the two, but I also want to stress the accountability that needs to take place when we think about the first conflict and not just the optimistic viewpoint of that. And one last thing I want to mention is, again, the numbers. Minnesota Street Project was founded and funded by 2 individuals, not a company, not taxpayers' dollars, 2 individuals to support 13 long-term 10-year leases signed galleries, rotating spaces supporting local, international, national, international gallery programs of visiting to provide programming for free to the public. We've provided 37 artists long-term studios. We serve approximately 70 to 80 artists a year in our studio building by offering opportunities through our facilities artist program. Artists with studios elsewhere can use our facilities we have. And we also have a number of rotating residencies in our program that support, and these have also been funded by other individuals that have fronted the money to pay for not only their rents, but to subsidize the rents across the building. And with that, I think that there are solutions at hand, and there are people here tonight that have examples on how to achieve those goals.
Thank you. That's great, and that's also a good segue to Connie, who can speak to a similar but different model in your creative center. And I know that the arts ecosystem in San Francisco, though relatively close in proximity, is very different in Silicon Valley. So I would love for you to talk about the partnerships that it's taken to get to this place where this creative center is going to become a reality, and how you're serving your unique ecosystem in the South Bay.
Okay, great. So as I was listening to you, Brian, in some ways our project, the structure and its complexity because of the number of partners is the opposite, right? Which also points to you can have more than one model. Mm-hmm. And in our case, the place itself really invited the partners. Okay, so we knew there was a problem. We knew that there were space issues. The case has been made. We don't need to reiterate that, right?
I did that for you.
Yes, you did that beautifully, and so did Joanne. And by the way, Joanne, we've worked very closely with your organization too, so she's the mother or godmother of all of us in some way. So anyway, the opportunity, this is an idea that is several years old, the idea of shared space and services for our ecosystem. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago when the Japantown site became a possibility that we were invited back to this table of thinking through how could we pull this off. So the first partnership category would be the developer and the city, because it was a city-owned property, and this was about a 6-acre piece of land in Japantown. And the developer knew that they would need to provide some kind of support for a community amenity in order to pull this off. So we became part of the entitlement process that we leveraged. They helped to pay most of our pre-development costs. The city wanted to do this for Japantown and for the community, so that was sort of the marriage was made because of that opportunity and the need. So then the next category I would point out is the Asian community connected to the significance of this site. And there's kind of 2 or 3 parts to that. This was literally the site of the 3rd Chinatown in San Jose, when 2 previously Chinatowns had been burned to the ground in the anti-Chinese movement in the 1880s. And this was a local entrepreneur that took the Chinese community under their wing and helped build the 3rd Chinatown, which thrived there for decades. And then eventually that Chinatown disappeared through the Great Depression and other challenges. At that point, they couldn't own land, and so there was this whole exclusionary act that impacted it. Japantown grew up over it. Little Manila grew up across the street, and part of the story is that the Japanese lost this piece of land while they were interned. So this is sacred land, and it's the last developable piece of land in Japantown, one of 3 that are remaining in the country, as I understand it, all in California. And so the cultural legacy of this, so we married the opportunity and the need to provide space and services to the ecosystem with developing a canvas or a platform to tell the story, the historical significance of this, literally this site, and position it as a beacon for hope and resilience for Asian immigrants. So as you would imagine, the Asian leaders of Silicon Valley are very much engaged, and Norm Mineta is chairing our Asian Legacy Fund, and we've been able to attract not only people who care about Japantown, but care about this story. Mm-hmm. Okay. The 3rd level of partnership is the ecosystem itself. So we've had the good fortune of engaging very deeply about a dozen of the organizations to help us almost co-design the facility. And so there's ownership built in, they're addressing we are addressing specific needs informed by them. So, and as a result, then that sort of trickles into a network of a couple dozen more. And so this will provide, we really have a performing space or a performing arts emphasis here, so that it's going to provide a lot of the rehearsal studios that the smaller groups really couldn't afford to have fully dedicated to them. So that's kind of solving that need, and it'll be the permanent home, of course, to San Jose Taiko and several others. So we're really fully leased before we open, which goes to the point of the demand exceeds supply, right? So we're excited by that. We're through design development, and if all goes as planned, we'll break ground in about a year. So a lot more work ahead of us. We haven't raised all of our money, but we're well on our way, so we're feeling good about that. And specific to the ecosystem, I think that in Silicon Valley, we have the same issues of housing and real estate that the whole Bay Area has. But probably what makes us somewhat different is we have no legacy organizations. So we have almost a web-like, vibrant ecosystem of smaller and mid-sized groups. And mid-size in our region are smaller in some. In other words, our large are mid-size and our mid-size are smaller, right? So, but there are those, and I have to point out, because there's no one solution. I'm happy that Institute of Contemporary Art and Mockler, they own your own buildings. So there is a group in the SOFA district of smaller groups that have actually bought their own buildings. I mean, that's huge. Our target market are those that wouldn't be in that category and get displaced, San Jose Jazz is one of them. They've literally been displaced 5 times in the last 6 years. So we're trying to solve that problem, but we're not the only solution, and we're not and no one of us is going to be the only solution. Right. So I think the idea of building a facility that is mortgage-free, which is the goal, and having the operating model, not so different from Minnesota project, essentially subsidize, or the operating rents of below market rents will pay for the operations of the building. So that's the sustainability piece, where no one organization carries the burden of the entire. So does that take care of that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. So I want to close it out with Rob. And from the perspective of the Asian Art Museum, you touched on it in your opening, but tell us how this affects the larger, more established organizations such as yours, and how might the cost of living and displacement and housing impact not only the artists that you serve, but your audience as well that you engage with?
Right. Thanks. How does it impact our audience? It changes our audience. That's very simple and straightforward. That our audience, the audience that can walk here from their home or from their office or from their workplace, or can stop their car when they're driving their Uber around, that audience is directly impacted by the cost of living here in the area, and the cost of real estate in particular, which drives them further and further out of the city. And we strive to serve everyone. Our point is Asia should matter to every single person in our society, and the arts of Asia are a way to convey that importance of understanding the world. So we want to reach everyone, and we can reach fewer and fewer people as people are pushed to the extremes. But as I was hearing each of us speak, I was thinking, Brion, some of your artists, the people who have been helped by your for-profit organization, have succeeded to the point where we suddenly say, wow, we want to give them our platform. We want to take what, in our partnership with the city owns our building and our foundation runs the operations here at the museum. We want to give a platform to that artist who's really, through your organization, been given the opportunity to hone their craft, to really polish their message, and has something now to say that everybody should be able to hear. And so we sort of step in and say, okay, come on, artist. Either we want to acquire your work for this collection and have it permanently owned by the city, or we want to give them a few moments in the sun to communicate with as broad an audience as possible. And I think each of us in some way is really working to provide artists the opportunity. None of us is actually out there directly teaching artists what to do. I did find myself thinking, how many artists who come directly out of art school actually know anything about real estate or how to run their business it is a complicated business to be a successful artist. We, in the museum world, our museum and all the other museums, we're at one end of that chain, but for those artists to get to us, to even be viable for us to provide a platform to them, they need a lot of help. And each of these organizations, in one way or another, gives them a piece of what they need. And I think of my own experience in art school. We were not actually giving people a very important piece, which is a fundamental understanding of what it takes to be an artist in our society. And I think here in San Francisco in particular, being an artist is very hard. And it really requires all of these for-profit and nonprofit organizations to be able to drive those artists forward, to give them the potential, the possibility of succeeding. So, yay, keep getting more artists so we can show them and we can buy them.
Thank you. Thank you all. I know it seems like we've just touched the tip of the iceberg with the conversation, and that is true. I want to encourage this conversation to continue. So Silicon Valley Community Foundation is hosting a region-wide event, an all-day event on November 15th called On the Table. And On the Table is designed, funded by the Knight Foundation, it's designed to have small, intimate conversations over a meal. And we want to specifically have these conversations about the issue of housing and transportation in our region. And I encourage us in this room to continue the conversation as it impacts arts and culture. So on November 15th, I encourage you to sign up to host a conversation or be part of a conversation. And we're gonna aggregate that data, and we wanna hear the solutions coming from our community members that are smarter than we are and that live it and breathe it and know how it impacts our community. So if you are interested in participating in On the Table, there is information at the back of the room. I can answer questions. So please consider. Additionally, I want to thank our panelists. I know that you guys each could have spoken for an hour, and we could continue this conversation, and maybe we should make it into a series, right? But
TV series.
Yeah. I don't want to keep you folks from visiting the exhibition, which we're so lucky to take part in tonight. So please enjoy. Find us. I know we're all willing to talk to you in order to continue this conversation. And I want to lastly thank, again, Asian Art Museum for giving us the space to have this really important talk. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.